Let's review the granddaddy of Fougeres and the fragrance that started this entire category, Houbigant Fougere Royale. Hey, what's going on? Hunter here and welcome back to my channel where I upload weekly fragrance content. So of course, go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below and also make sure to follow me over on my Instagram page. But today we have a historic fragrance in my hands. So glad to finally have a bottle of this in my collection. And it is of course Fougere Royale, the fragrance that started the entire Fougere category that we have known and loved, especially me. Huge fan of Fougere barbershop aromatic fragrances. And thank goodness for this one because we probably wouldn't have the ones we have now without it. This is absolutely a staple for any Fougere aficionado or just perfume lover in general to have in their collection. And I'll tell you why that is a little bit later. But before we do, let's go and go over some information. So originally Fougere was launched back in 1882, guys. That's well over 100 years at the time of this recording. Extremely old fragrance, and it's hard to imagine this has been around so long. But I believe it was reintroduced or relaunched back in 2010, so I'm not sure if much has changed since the original formulation. And I do know they also have a parfum flanker of this fragrance as well, which actually goes for like $600, which is crazy. However, I believe it's still the same formulation. Nothing has changed with it, just launched back in 1882 and relaunched in 2010. For the retail price, you can pick up a bottle for $210 to have basically a piece of history in your collection. So I don't think that's too bad, especially since it's been around for almost like 150 years at this point. So yeah, $210 is the price tag. For the concentration, this one is an eau de parfum. So of course it's a little bit higher than like an eau de cologne, eau de toilette, but a little bit less than the parfum flanker. Which, I mean, $600, that's a lot of money. So you would absolutely have to love this DNA to go ahead and spend that on the parfum, which I believe is literally the same exact fragrance, just more concentrated. It's not different like a lot of flankers are completely different. No, same fragrance, just highly concentrated. So the original perfumer all the way back to 1882 is actually Paul Parquet, who is the original nose behind this scent profile at least. But back in 2010 when it relaunched, Rodriguez Flores Roux was the perfumer that recreated this fragrance and kind of brought it back and put it together, who's actually a master perfumer and is loved by so many people and has created so many great fragrances. Now with all that out of the way, let's look at the packaging and presentation you're gonna get with Fougere Royale now. Now take a look at the box. It is a traditional fragrance box, nothing exciting about it. You do have the Fougere Royale, the kind of Houbigant logo in the front, eau de parfum 100 ml bottle. On the bottom of your box, we'll have your barcode and batch code to authenticate your product and see when it was produced. And then basically just the same thing, I believe, on both sides. And then on top, you have that Houbigant H. So let's look at the bottle now. All right, looking at this absolutely elegant presentation of a bottle right here. Of course, you have Fougere Royale and a plaque right there. You have the Houbigant logo embossed all in the glass. On the bottom, you do have your sticker with your batch code. Nothing on the back. Then on top, of course, of the cap, you have Houbigant all around embossed in the metal. Then on top, same logo, nothing in the cap, nothing on the atomizer. And it holds on by friction, but it actually holds on extremely tight for being a heavy bottle. In the top, you have lavender, green notes, chamomile, and bergamot. In the mid, you have geranium, carnation, cinnamon, lilac, and rose. And in the base, you have oak moss, clary sage, patchouli, tonka bean, and amber. And this will be classified as a fresh green. So let's spray this and test out the atomizer. Not the best atomizer, but of course it gets the job done, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So let's go ahead and spray this absolutely classic, historic creation. I swear, the moment I put my nose on this, I'm just transported back to the 1800s, guys. That is literally what happens in my brain when I smell this. It basically, to me, smells like old money. Very sophisticated scent profile, very luxurious, very rich. This smells like being wealthy in the 1800s. So right away in the top of Fougere Royale, when you spray this one on, you're first going to be greeted with an explosion of this vibrant green bergamot, along with a very fresh herbal note as well. So just all in all, very, very green, but you also have a combination of that lavender, which is a little bit spicy of a lavender, which I love the way the lavender is done in here. And it's kind of surprising because the first time I wore this one, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously being 150 years old, I thought it would smell very old, very outdated, but from initial spray, that was the exact opposite impression I had. It smelled more modern in the top than I was actually expecting, even though that does change once we get into the dry down. But just that top is so timeless and classic. Now, as the scent starts to evolve into the heart of Fougere Royale is when that lavender is gonna start to become center stage to my nose. Of course, you picked it up a little bit in the top, but it was more so behind the green qualities of the bergamot and herbal green notes. So the lavender starts to come through, which actually comes across very velvety, very well done and high quality. It kind of smells like I'm walking through a lavender field. That is how authentic this lavender is done. However, the lavender in the heart isn't the only thing you're gonna get. You're actually gonna get some other floral nuances in here that just brings a refinement and elegant nature about the whole aroma of this fragrance. Kind of makes it a little bit more classy with all those florals, but primarily it's the lavender, and I'm getting this kind of powdery geranium rosiness about it also, which just makes for an extremely classy heart of lavender and rose. So in the final stage of Fougere Royale is when the age starts to actually show itself, because you are going to be left with the foundation of a timeless classic oak moss note that is very, very earthy and could be classified as like old school smelling. But me personally, I love oak moss in my fragrances, especially when it's done in this way. Even though this one is a little bit more outdated than the oak moss used nowadays, but you are still gonna get a burst of an old school earthy oak moss foundation, which kind of just gives it a vintage charm with that old school oak moss. And that's what you're gonna expect when a fragrance is this old. You're gonna want it to actually smell like old school and kind of transports you back to the 1800s. And that's exactly what it does, especially once you get into that foundation of the base of that earthy oak moss. I'm not really getting any of the other notes like the sage, patchouli, amber, or even tonka bean, just primarily oak moss rounded off. And it's not gonna be your typical modern oak moss that you find in a lot of modern fragrances like nishane hacivat has an oak moss base. Completely different. This one actually smells more authentic, more classy, and more old school. It actually almost smells like real oak moss. However, you can't use raw oak moss in fragrances anymore. It got banned, I believe, a few years ago, but it definitely hits that mark perfectly as coming across authentic. Which is kind of strange how complex and how much this fragrance changes, because in the top, it actually smelled more modern than I was expecting. The mid was so-so, and then that base, it turns completely old school. Also, fun fact for you guys that just crossed my mind just now. This was actually first created targeted towards women back in the 1800s, believe it or not, until a bunch of men started wearing it, and then obviously they started to make it towards men rather than women. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. Plus, a lot more women wore perfume back then than men. A lot of guys didn't really have fragrances. That's why if you look at like the oldest fragrances in the world, they were mostly targeted towards women. Of course, you had a ton of Guerlain fragrances targeted towards women back then, like the 1800s and stuff. You also had, of course, had like Chanel No. 5 in the early 1900s. So yeah, most fragrances back then were targeted towards women, and so was Fougere Royale, surprisingly. So for the best seasons to wear this fragrance, I actually think it's versatile. You can wear this one all 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. It just works perfectly as like a signature scent for somebody. And of course, that's what they were doing 100 years ago as well. They were just wearing Fougere Royale all year round. So yeah, perfect versatile fragrance for all seasons. Now for occasions. So this is actually an extremely formal fragrance. Probably one of the most formal fragrances I have in my collection, if I'm being honest with you. It just does not do it justice if you're wearing this one with a hoodie and stuff, because even back then, people walking the streets, the guys at least, were always in suits. Like 24/7 just wearing a suit. Nobody's wearing hoodies. Nobody's really wearing jeans or t-shirts or anything like that back in the 1800s. So this literally just smells like money. This smells like royalty. It smells like somebody in a suit or even a tuxedo just dressed up and looking fancy. Of course, could wear a dress down nowadays because of how versatile it is, but please just wear this one dressed up and it will shine beautiful. So for gender, I know I said earlier it was first targeted towards women as a perfume. However, nowadays when we kind of decipher women's fragrances, men's fragrances, without a doubt a masculine, like very masculine leaning aromatic Fougere fragrance. So nothing really feminine about it besides possibly the rosy mid, but that is like the least bit of concern with all the aromatic lavender, the oak moss, of course, the green notes, etc. So very masculine, very male forward fragrance. But if you are a woman watching this one and you have an appreciation for aromatic fragrances, you could still maybe pull it off. I mean, at the end of the day, it was first targeted towards you guys. So wrapping the review off, talking on the performance of Fougere Royale. Now, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought maybe the performance would be lackluster. It would be more so wear like a cologne, which is very kind of thin and airy. That wasn't really necessarily the case. I got about average from my testing, which means about 8 hours of longevity on skin. If you spray on clothes, of course, it will last a little bit longer than that 8-hour mark, but on skin, that is actually pretty solid, especially for a fragrance of this genre. No complaints when it comes to performance. With the projection, it does actually project nicely for maybe an hour and a half up to that 2-hour mark until it starts to come a little bit closer to your scent bubble, and basically this lasts up to that 8-hour mark until it turns into a complete skin scent. But at the end of the day, it's gonna get you through like a 8-hour work shift without any problems necessarily. So no complaints when it comes to performance. Fantastic, classic, historical creation by Houbigant Paris. Absolutely love this fragrance, and whenever I want to smell like old money or I want to smell sophisticated, this is absolutely going to be one of my go-tos from now on. That's going to do it for my review of this legendary Fougere Royale. Let me know down below if you ever had the pleasure of getting your nose on this beauty. And if you ever tried the parfum flanker of it, I'm kind of curious how that one compares to this one. But besides that, leave a like on the video. Subscribe down below if you haven't already. And of course, you already know, I'll see all of you back here in my next upload. Take care, everybody.